Is it possible to be addicted to a person? Toxic relationships are not technically a substance, but the behaviors they can drive you toward look very much like a substance addiction. When it's happening to you, it's almost like you're under a spell and you know you should get away from the person and forget about them, but one little bit of contact with them can start the whole destructive cycle over again. So this is another form of what is called limerence. And that's the name for an infatuation or an obsession for someone who's not actually with you, or not entirely anyway. And a lot of people have asked if you can have limerence for someone who you actually do have some kind of relationship with. And so I wanted to share the story here of someone I'll call Martin. And here's what he says. About a year ago, I met a woman I'll call Angela. We entered into a relationship pretty quickly, and it was very intense by my standards. We've been broken up now for several months, and I'm still suffering. The relationship was only good for about 3 months, but I think I'm experiencing a trauma bond, and the relationship has the markings of emotional abuse and perhaps narcissism, though I'm hesitant to label or diagnose, and I hoped you could help. Before I met Angela, I had a feeling about the kind of relationship I wanted to have. I wanted a partnership with someone who wanted to grow together, and this was kind of new for me. In the past, I used to just approach relationships with a see how it goes attitude, but there was never a goal. And for the record, I'm a divorced father of 2, and my past relationships, even though they didn't work out in the end, were pretty good. With Angela, I went into it knowing I wanted a lasting relationship, and she let me know pretty early that she was on board. There was a lot of synchronicity. It felt magical. We were texting all day, every day, having video chats and spending a lot of time together where we'd talk about the future. Within 3 months, we were talking about collaborations on business ventures and perhaps even moving in together in the near future. About this time, we went on a trip together and everything suddenly changed practically overnight. We had been at a big festival and I had to leave and go home, and she stayed longer. Before I left, she said that she could feel herself withdrawing and something about sabotaging the relationship, and that I would be more hurt than she would be. I asked her what she meant, if she meant we should break up or something, and she deflected and talked about plans to move in together in the future. After I got home, I got a call from her, and she said she didn't want to be in a relationship anymore. She said she wasn't relationship material. I said, "So we're breaking up then?" And she said, "Whoa, stop thinking in such extreme terms." She said, "That is linear thinking." She went away to her folks' place for a while, and I thought, well, we're not broken up yet. Let's just see what happens. Now, this is where I get mad at myself. The whole dynamic went on through the summer, where we weren't broken up, but we weren't in a relationship. Her communication at this time was cold, the total opposite of the first 3 months. I knew it wasn't healthy for me, but when I would start to pull away, she'd want me back. She called me from a cafe and blamed all of this on her avoidant attachment disorder. She said I was the love of her life and apologized, and said she wanted to heal and grow together again. So then I'd take her back thinking, well, if she's aware of this attachment issue, maybe we can work with it. And then as soon as I'd get back into it, the cold communication started again. For example, when we were at the festival, she had uploaded a lot of photos that were taken of us together there. She put them on her Facebook page. It didn't really bother me, except that there was no communication with me about it. And then when she had that flip happen, when she turned cold again, she took all the photos down. Then later she'd put them all up again, still not communicating with me, and then take them down again. And through all of this, there was no communication. And I asked her at one point, why did she take the photos of me down? And she said, well, they gave the impression that we're in a relationship, and we're not. Another time over the summer, those photos came up again, and she denied that she ever put them up and took them down again. The worst thing about all of this is the confusion. Yeah, that's just one example of back and forth, but it went on for months, and that's why I get angry at myself. I feel like I betrayed myself, and I enabled her. If she saw me pulling away again, she'd send me a playlist with love songs. She told me once that she was afraid I'd leave her, and so while she was away, she started a journal of her uninhibited thoughts and promised to send them to me or to give them to me when she got back into town. And of course, that never happened. She came back, but never spoke about the journal again. By this time, I felt like any attempt to communicate with her was going to just be confusing. I never knew who was going to show up. I told her I needed time alone, and I made that clear. The word breakup did come up. It was brought up by both of us, but first by me. She said, "Is that what's happening?" And I nodded. I circle things that I want to come back to when I'm going to read the letter again, and we're going to come back and talk about parts of this. So she looked sad, and I asked for no contact and for her to just let me be, to let me be in my power, to let me be grounded, to not be confused, to connect with my soul again, to connect with the feeling I had before we met. The next morning, she sent me a selfie because she was starting a new job. And I texted her to say, "You look good. They're lucky to have you, but please, no more contact." She waited 2 days and said, "I'll wait for you to contact me." Then she sent a little sad face emoji and another and another. And within a couple more days, she just started flooding me with texts incessantly and trying to call using guilt. It was all about her. She said, "I'm trembling inside. Please have some compassion." She wanted to meet to come get some kind of closure with me. When I didn't respond at all, her tactic went from guilt to anger and then rage. She started smearing me on Facebook. It may be going on still, but we've blocked each other. After a couple months, though, I sent her a letter explaining my timeline, how I understood what happened between us, that it seemed like she felt entitled to me and she didn't have to respond, but I wished her the best. She didn't respond for more than a week, and when she did, she said, "I received your letter and I will answer it soon." I didn't expect anything, but maybe a month later she called and said, "I'm just calling to tell you I will not be answering your letter." But the texts started again. "Come on, we're friends. Show some compassion and be there for me." And my problem is, I want so badly to answer her texts. It's like an alcoholic who wants to take a drink. If I text her, I'll be hooked again. I've come so far getting over her, but if I connect again, it'll be like starting from day one. What I really want is that feeling that I had before we met. I know how I want it to feel, and I've learned what to look out for. I was stronger in my boundaries in the beginning, and then it all got lost. But I'm getting stronger now. I'd love to meet someone really wonderful and live our lives together, but I haven't quite gotten free of the pull of this woman I know is out there. I can't get over it. I don't even know what to grieve. The woman I thought I loved, the relationship I thought we had, or the person I was before she met me. How can I heal and get free so that I can move on with my life and never get pulled down like that again? Martin. So this letter, this is a hard one. Just reading this, I feel my energy like sucked out of me. That's how this story affects me. And I think this might be something like what you're feeling, Martin. And why you're having trouble disengaging from this, because it feels like you ought to be able to get your energy back, like it got taken away from you from this woman, and maybe you could somehow get it back. Let's go through what you wrote. About a year ago, I met a woman I'll call Angela. We entered into a relationship pretty quickly. All right, for people who have had trauma as a kid, and I know you had a separate story about that, which I didn't cover here, going quick is one of the fastest ways to have a relationship that sort of brings up all of our stuff. And so if you've watched any of my videos, and I think you have, you know that I'm always advocating, like, slow it down, slow it down. But by the time I'm getting letters from people, they're usually in something that brought up all the old stuff. And so here we are, and that's fine. So you got in quickly, and it was very intense. And now you've been broken up for several months, but you're still suffering. The relationship was only good for about 3 months, and you think you're experiencing a trauma bond. I think so too. And the relationship has markings of emotional abuse. I think so too. And perhaps narcissistic traits. I think so too. I don't know if we would diagnose anyone here. We don't have to. We can just say that the traits are there. So before you met her, you had a feeling about the kind of relationship you wanted to have. So you were in touch with yourself. You say, I wanted a partnership with someone who wanted to grow together. And this was kind of new for me. In the past, I used to just approach relationships with a see how it goes attitude. So you used to just kind of cast it to the wind. And that's kind of a CPTSD thing too. The pattern that I notice in your letter is that in a lot of what you're going through, You have given away the power and your fate to another person. And a little bit, I could just hear there's sort of a fog of denial that actually you're the one with agency. You're the one who decides. So you would see how it goes, but that's sort of, in this case, knowing what I know from this letter, I would say you're waiting to see, like, how does the woman feel about it? So when you lose your power like that, it's an extremely vulnerable place. A lot of people say, oh, I attract narcissists. And I always say, well, it doesn't really matter who we attract. What matters is who we end up getting together with. And so for somebody who's very selfish and wants to use somebody to fill in some gap in their life, but not actually care about them as a person, which is kind of the story I'm hearing in this letter, that that's how she treated you. Well, that becomes possible when they find someone who's just going to sit around and wait and see what they do, and it doesn't really have a boundary or a set of standards for themselves. You have standards, but they got wobbly here around her, and I can only guess she must be very dazzling. I don't know, beautiful, talented, charming, fun. So a lot of great things happened there to sort of draw you in. But then it's a foggy world where you have no defenses. That's the feeling I get about this relationship. So you didn't have a goal in previous relationships. And for the record, you're a divorced father of 2. Cool. Having kids puts extra premium on having a healthy relationship, if you have one at all, because it's so important for the kids, right? To model that for them. So fantastic that you're not in this relationship anymore, and that's not going to influence the kids any more than it may have already. And that your past relationships have been pretty good, even if they didn't work out. But with Angela, you went in knowing what you wanted. She let you know she was on the same page. She wanted a big future, big, long-term committed relationship that you would grow together. Sounds really good. And then you got really enmeshed. You were texting all day, every day. When people fall in love, they do that. When it has a sort of dark side to it, that's when we call it enmeshed. And so even the most pure love, when it doesn't have any oxygen from the outside world, when you're just completely into each other, texting all day, every day, video chats, talking about moving in together, getting together, and always being about the future, that's really vulnerable. And so, Martin, I know that you're, hoping to meet somebody great. And so just as I go through this, one tip I'm going to give you here is when you are dating, be very careful about talking about the future. The future is something you could really, I always suggest to people, like, if you have a criteria, like, I'm looking to get married, I have kids, and you would be their step parent. Those are things that kind of need to be floated out there fairly early in the dating relationship. But talking about the future and trying to imagine it and construct it, especially if you have attachment wounds or trauma, or one of your parents or both of them were very neglectful to you, it can be a really vulnerable thing. It can be prone to fantasy and limerence. So even though you're sitting with a real person right in front of you, you're interacting with a fantasy person. And I would say this person was interacting with some kind of fantasy of her own. I don't know her, and she hasn't written in, and she can't speak for herself here. But something's going on there. Some people call it future faking. I want to move in with you. It turned out very quickly that wasn't at all where she was coming from. But that's one of the reasons why going slowly, because, just because we have CPTSD, we will often find ourselves kind of having a romantic involvement with someone who doesn't have those boundaries, who leaps into the future, who's not really capable of building a relationship and building commitment and building a real, true friendship, where deciding to live together would happen at an organic time after you actually knew if you were compatible and wanted a future together. I think, when you get to be north of 40, and younger really, moving in together becomes, many of us have had the experience that it's not easily undone. It's something to take extremely seriously. Some people just don't even do it. They get married or they live separately. It's a complicated kind of commitment. It has a certain open-endedness to it, and yet your livelihood, your home, everything becomes like wrapped up in the relationship. And if you have that wound inside and you have that fear of abandonment going on, having your home wrapped up with an unreliable person and your money and your social circle and all that stuff, it's just too much to lose. And you could end up clinging to a bad relationship much longer than you should, or losing it altogether because the person leaves you. Well, we can tolerate a certain amount of that in life, but if you've had a traumatic life, I really wish for you to have a slowly unfolding romance where maybe you date several people to see who the one is, and then a slow unfoldment of one who turns out to be like a really good person for you to be with, which you could discover in certainly no less than a year. Usually more like a year and a half, 3 years would be a normal, healthy time to be dating somebody before you decide to stake everything on them. And especially because you're kids. What's great about kids is you can think about what's good for the kids. What's good for the kids is good for you. So just as it would not be good for them to have some partner of yours sort of come in and leave or a bunch of drama, it's not good for you either. So this is where the story gets odd and hard for you. About this time you went to a big festival and everything suddenly changed. It was like overnight, just boom. So you were going to move in together. Everything was so great. Then when you had to leave and she stayed and she said some weird thing about feeling like she was withdrawing and maybe it was over and you're just, and then she denied when you said, are we broken up? She's just like, what are you talking about? No, we're moving in together. Very confusing. Very, right there, the red flags are just starting to like, it's a red alert. Okay, after I got home, I got a call from her. She said she didn't want to be in the relationship anymore. She said she wasn't relationship material. By the way, when people say that, even though sometimes that's a cover for something else that they don't want to tell you, like perhaps what might be the case here is she met somebody else. But it means they're not. When somebody wants to be with you, how you'll know is because they are with you, because they don't want to risk losing you, okay? And so they don't mess around with scaring you or saying they're not relationship material. They're going to put on their best behavior and try to impress you. So then you said, so we're breaking up, and she said, whoa, stop thinking in such extreme terms. And she said I was linear thinking. Okay, this is hallmark. Everybody gets mad when I say this. There can be all kinds of ideological and spiritual abuse, but accusing you of linear thinking is a kind of ideological abuse or maybe spiritual abuse. Like, when monogamy is expected and had been promised, and you're accused of being too much in your head or thinking too linearly, it's like more red flags, red alert. You're not too linear of a thinker by asking, are we broken up, when she says she doesn't want to be in a relationship with you. So this is just like all out gaslighting here and saying you're too linear, you're too extreme. And it sounds like, I'm just going to read between the lines here. Well, I'll read about the next part here about the Facebook pictures. Then she went away to her folks and you thought, well, we're not broken up yet, so let's just see what happens. And I circled that, Martin, because you said that in the past you used to have this, let's just see how it goes attitude and no goal. So this is the point where you really surrendered your goal and you're just like, well, let's just see if she comes around and wants to be with you. And at this point, I think if you were stronger and more healed inside, you'd be going, F this person. They're being awful and inconsistent and blowing hot and cold and saying terrible things and accusing you of being too linear, that you want to know if you're in a relationship or not. At that point, I think that would be, it's a pretty obvious time to break up with somebody, but you think, let's just see what happens. And maybe you mean, like, let's just see what your heart tells you. But how this story plays out, I just see you getting tossed around on this stormy sea of this other person and her whims for you. And that her whims for you have everything to do about what's convenient for her and never anything to do with how you might feel. And I'm guessing that there was a precedent for that in your childhood, that people did not take seriously what you needed and things were all about them. All right. So then you said, this is where you get mad at yourself. Good, healthy anger. The whole dynamic went on through the summer where you weren't broken up, but you weren't together. How convenient for her, right? Her communication at this time was cold, the total opposite of the first 3 months. I knew it wasn't healthy for me, but when I would start to pull away, she'd want me back. Surprise, surprise. Yep. She wanted you not here, not gone. She wanted you right about here. Probably for not evil reasons, but that's just kind of where she wanted you, and she knew that wouldn't work for you. And so, she just kept saying, she just fed you what you wanted to hear so that you would stick around. It's nice to have somebody kind of waiting in the wings for you. It sounds very much, though, like she wanted to appear single for one or more other people and just keep you kind of as a backup insurance policy. And that's very harsh to say, but that is definitely what I'm sort of detecting here. All right. You knew it wasn't healthy for you. No, it wasn't. But when you pull away, she'd do it again, just pull you back in. And she called you from a cafe and she blamed all of this on her avoidant attachment disorder. You know, maybe that there's certainly signs of that, but it sounds like it's something even worse. And I'm not a therapist or a clinician of any kind, but what I know about avoidant attachment disorder is, it's all about avoidance. So this getting all enmeshed and pulling together, that suggests that there's something else going on. So she said you were the love of her life, and she apologized, and she said she wanted to heal and grow together. Those are like the magic words for you, right? I want to heal and grow together, because that was your ideal, and she knew that. And so that you'd take her back. And you did, and you were thinking, well, now if she's aware she has this issue, maybe we can work with it. And I totally get it. You know, I was in a relationship with a guy who had a terrible drug addiction, and he said, I'm so sorry, I'm going to go to treatment, and he got into treatment, and I thought, see, so as long as he's actually in treatment, there's hope for us. But obviously our two cases are very different, but in that case, when I look back, I just say, even if he was utterly sincere, which he wasn't, he was doing it just so I wouldn't leave. Even if he had been utterly sincere, it's a long road for somebody who's that dysfunctional to actually heal enough to become a person who would be good to be in a relationship with, whether it's drugs or whether it's this just like crazy back and forth deception and inconsideration and selfishness. So let's just say it's not like some kind of a personality disorder or anything. It's the facts. This is how she acts. And I just wouldn't recommend to anybody, and I don't want for you. You're just like a dear person. You want love. I just don't wish this on you at all, for somebody to treat you like that. But I get it, how the trauma bonding, as you mentioned, for anybody watching, trauma bonding it's like a psychological phenomenon. It could happen to anybody, not just traumatized people, where when somebody's like, I love you, I love you, I love you, and then they're like, I'm not talking to you. And then I love you, I love you, I love you, and then I'm not talking to you. It like hooks something in our brains. It just gets us hooked in. It gets us obsessed with when am I going to get the next, cookie of affection, of acknowledgement, of touch, of talking and contact. It can make a person obsessed. It can make a person addicted. Okay, so then you give us the example of the cold communication, which is that when you were at the festival, she put a bunch of pictures of you guys up on Facebook without asking you. And I'd say in a new relationship, yeah, you're supposed to ask. It's a very public thing to do. And especially if you tag them, it goes on their page, and it's like announcing like, hey, I'm the girlfriend of this guy. So, what some people might call a pissing match. And it didn't bother you. You were okay to be public, except it was weird that she didn't talk to you. Correct. Then when her whole personality flipped, when she turned cold again, she took all the photos down. Then she put them back up there again and then take them down again. And through all of this, there was no communication. You asked her at one point why she did it, and she said, well, they gave the impression that we were in a relationship and we're not. Okay, so Martin, this is the hardest tough love moment of this. Why would somebody at a festival take pictures down? It's so that they can appear available to somebody else. I am getting a strong sense there was somebody else, or many people. I doubt it was like the love of her life or anything worked out great, because she's very erratic with this stuff. But putting you up there without talking to you is, lots of people do it. It's normal. But that thing where she doesn't talk to you and throws it up there and wants to create an impression, it's all about how other people see her. That's what I'm saying. How you feel about having the pictures put up, how you feel about having them taken down, don't matter to her. They would matter to anybody, both things, putting them up, taking them down. It speaks a lot, and anybody would have feelings about that she doesn't care, and that she later denied that she ever put them up and down. Okay, that's BS, okay? That's not cool. That's a utter self-centeredness, and she seems to be completely driven about how other people see her and doesn't want to appear to be in a relationship, and there's only one reason why people do that. The worst of it, you say, is the confusion. That was just one example of the sort of back and forth of hot and cold. It went on for months, and that's why you get angry at yourself, which I understand. You feel like you betrayed yourself. And I understand, I mean, yes, but I understand how that happened. You know, it could happen to any of us, really. It has. And you enabled her. I guess so. Yeah, you could call it that. If she saw you pulling away again, she'd send you a playlist with love songs. She told you once she was afraid that she'd get left, and so while she was away, she started a journal of all her uninhibited thoughts. I'm guessing that's some sort of sexy thing, and promised to send it to you or give it to you when she got back into town. Man, what a manipulative hook. Basically, like if somebody was an alchemist and tried to take a man's brain and just put a giant gaffing hook in it and go, just yank it, but then just throw it aside, I'd say that's how to do it, you know? That would be how to do it. So it never happened. She came back. It was never spoken about again. But this time, you felt like any attempt to communicate with her was going to be confusing, and you were right, Martin. You never knew who was going to show up, and so that's interesting. Yeah, just like a totally unstable personality there. I'm sure not going to be surprised if she was traumatized too, but just because we're traumatized doesn't give us the right to trample all over other people. It may give us difficulty in relationships. It may cause our personalities to go out of control. I know lots of people struggle with mental illness, but that still doesn't make it okay to abuse people emotionally. Everything that you suspected here, narcissistic traits, emotional abuse, and trauma bond, I think you're right. I think your perception is accurate, and I just want to validate that. Sometimes just having that validated by someone who gets it is enough to just help you go, okay, you know, and wash that person out of your hair. I love that song. I'm going to wash that man right out of my hair. And there's a time for that, isn't there? So get ready. Get that shower warming up, Martin. It's time. It's coming time. Let's read the rest of the letter. Okay. I told her I needed time alone, and I made that clear. Clear. I'm going to circle, because what I think is part of the part that you might be able to adjust about this for your next relationship is your concept of what is clear and what is not clear. You say the word breakup did come up. It was brought up by both of us, but first by me. It's weird how you use a sort of passive verb on that. The word was brought up. It's like, you don't say, I broke up with her. I made it clear that I was breaking up with her. That's not what you say. You say, I needed time alone, and the word came up, like it had a life of its own, and it came in, and it flew out of my mouth. It flew out of her mouth. I'm not really sure what to make of it, but she said, is that what's happening? And you nodded. Okay, nodding instead of going, yes, Angela, it's over, babe. That's it. You know, that would be clear, but I nodded. That's ambiguous. All right. And I get it. But this, I just, you know, the picture I have of this and the way that I feel drained reading the letter, I just think you are dealing with a vampire. And yeah, even coming close to the story, it's very draining. She looked sad when you nodded, and when you asked for no contact. You asked, not told. When you want no contact, you don't ask for it, you declare it. All right? I'm just telling you here. I'm hearing the passivity in what you're doing here, and I think that's what it is. That spell that this whole relationship has cast over you. It's like drained your power to the point that you're like, please, can you just give me no contact, and not just pulling down the wall yourself. And then you asked for her to let you be in your power. So if it's your power, nobody has to let you be in it. Your power is your power, and you generate that power. You hold that power regardless of what she wants or allows, right? And you wanted to be allowed, she said, you asked her to let you be grounded. You asked her so that you could not be confused. You wanted to connect with your soul again and connect with the feeling that you had before you met. And so here, there's just like this crucial, you know, mind F here, where it got you believing that she had to give that to you, that she held all the power. And because you fell into that false belief, it actually became a true situation. She had all that power over you. Not that she could do anything with it. She sounds very unwell. But the next morning, she sent you a selfie. So you said no contact. So she sends you a picture the next day because she was starting a new job. So you had said no contact, but did you have no contact? No, you typed back and said she looked good. Oh, you made her feel good about herself. And you said they're lucky to have you. But, you know, actually, I don't think they are. Based on how she treated you, I think that it's very unlikely that that's going to go very well for people. But you gave her the compliment, and I just, that's a clue sometimes when somebody is emotionally abusive to you and you're like, you look good, honey. They're so lucky to have you. Like, in what dynamic do we do that, right? The dynamic would be more like narcissist and codependent. Again, can't diagnose anybody, but that's the dynamic that looks like. Then you say, please, no more contact. So again, please, like you're begging her for no contact. And if you're serious about no contact, you can do it. You block the person, and if it comes to it, you can get a restraining order. And I don't think that would be totally out of line here because of what she ended up doing, okay? And then that's where you tell us about this. She waited about 2 days after you said no contact, so no respect here. And then she said, I'll wait for you to contact me. I could just see her calculating. What can I say to break contact and try to hook him in again? Okay, I'll wait for you to contact me. Okay, but you said no contact. Then she sent little sad face emoji and another and another. So she's just sitting there. It's like with a fishing pole, just casting out with her hook. Come on, Martin, come on, come back to me. But with a hook, just like, ah. Not love. There's nothing here that's love. You know that, right? This is not love. This is consumption. Then she started flooding you with texts incessantly, trying to call you on the phone using guilt. It was all about her, yeah. She said, I'm trembling inside. Please have some compassion. So she's trying every tactic in the book. Oh, poor me. It's going to break me. She wanted to meet and come and have some sort of closure. Okay, big red flag word for anybody who's watched my videos, that word closure. In the context of a breakup, closure, sure. If you had a serious relationship, let's say you were married and suddenly the person leaves, or you were engaged, like in a serious committed relationship that suddenly ends and one person never knew why, then having that conversation eventually would be closure. But in this one, you don't need closure. There's no closure. Closure is almost always a code word for the opposite of closure. I just want to get together and talk so we can have some closure means I just want to get together and talk so I can hook you in again, get that emotional ball rolling again, right? So you say, when I didn't respond at all, her tactic went from guilt to anger and then rage. I'm not surprised because she's just trying the full spectrum of tactics to hook you in. She started smearing you on Facebook. Okay, this is where it goes from, I can't tell whether, it's emotional abuse because I wasn't there, but smearing people on Facebook, yes, that is abuse. And it may be going on still, except you've blocked her. Good job. After a couple months, though, I sent her a letter, you say, explaining my timeline. Okay, oops, so you had a relapse. That's what that is. And I know that your mind is thinking, okay, it was a couple months, but I'm just going to say, Martin, what were you thinking would happen if you explained your timeline? Like, what possible good could come from reaching out to an abusive, unstable person so that they know your timeline? Like, oh, now I know your timeline and what you believe happened. And then what happens? They say, oh, I'm so sorry. I was a jerk. I wish, or oh, I'm coming back to you. I realize I love you. You mentioned this. There's parts of the letter I didn't include. We had a very long exchange on it. But this is addiction, and that's addiction can sort of grab hold of your mind and make you think like, okay, it's been 2 months. I can do it now. Like, it's safe for me to have contact now, just like an alcoholic will go, okay, I didn't drink for 2 months. Now I can drink. It'll just be one. It'll be fine. You said it seemed like she felt entitled to you. You're right. You have very good perception about this. It's just that some part of your brain gets hijacked and just keeps thinking that somehow you can make it change if you just say and do the right thing. And so the rest of our hair just to go, oh yeah, we've done that too, and it never works. Okay. And you said she didn't have to respond, but you know what was going to happen. You said you wished her the best, and she didn't respond for more than a week. Oh, I like that tactic too. Like, let there be a little bit of worry that that you're not going to get back. That's how you sort of build suspense. In a trauma bond, you can never just get back to somebody. You have to delay it so that they just get all wound up waiting for that, so that when they do get a lousy text from you, they're just like, I got a text. That's how trauma bonding works. It always has to be interspersed with neglect and abandonment and just coldness. And then, love bomb, right? When she did respond, she said, this is just to tell you I'll answer it soon. Okay? Then you say you didn't expect anything, but I'm going to say you did, or you would never have written her. And then maybe a month later, she called and she said, I'm just calling you to tell you I won't be answering your letter. Well, when you're not going to answer somebody's letter, you don't call them. That was a hook. That was another one. And I love that. It's like all dressed up as like, I've got boundaries, right? But it's not boundaries. It's a hook and it's a break of contact. But that's okay. We all do it. We're all just trudging along here trying to figure out, how do we love? How do we live life, right? So you're just like everyone here, and you're good. All right. But the text started again. So here come the texts from her, and she starts saying, come on, we're friends. Show some compassion. Be there for me. Okay, more of her tactics. So then you say, Martin, my problem is I want so badly to answer the texts. It's like, yep, that's what they were designed to do. And it's like an alcoholic who wants to take a drink. If I text her, I'll be hooked again, and I've come so far getting over her. But if I connect again, it'll be like starting from day one. So one thing that alcoholics do when they're in early sobriety is they don't go around people drinking. And they sometimes live in sober living houses, and they set themselves up to eliminate the trigger. And the trigger for you is contact with her. It would also be thinking about her, fantasizing that it could have been okay. And so this is, I would class this as a form of limerence with somebody you actually did have a relationship with, but you're having a romance with the idea, with that incredible experience you had in the first 3 months. And even though it went totally to hell, you're still like in love with that her and with that you and with that couple and that possibility that you once had there. And so the process of healing is going to involve just facing that and seeing it for what it was, that was the hope of what it was, but time did allow you to see what the reality of that relationship is. And a lot of what, you can learn a lot about relationships. We're so good at compartmentalizing things because of that crap fit thing from growing up, being very good at sort of compartmentalizing. It's like, I know that, mom and dad hit each other, but we're also a very nice family, and I can show that to the world. We get so good at compartmentalizing abusive behavior from this other part of life that it seems normal to you or possible to you that the person who treats you like this could actually be this, wonderful relationship. And so it keeps your heart engaged with it. And it's very painful to face reality and say, this is a very disturbed and unstable person. And I don't know exactly what's wrong with her, but I know how she treats you, and it's unacceptable. And it's definitely nothing that would ever turn into a happy relationship. And so one gut check and reality check is, well, what does it feel like to be with this person? Well, what did it feel like to be with that person? Well, that is how it feels to be with that person. It feels like it just does not feel good. It makes you feel bad. It makes you angry. You turned it on yourself, like you're angry at yourself for putting up with it. But I think as time goes by, your anger will quite rightly be directed outward at the person who mistreated you. So it's interesting. You say, what I really want is that feeling that I had before we met. So, I think sometimes people come into our lives like a tornado, and they just come in and they wreck the whole trailer park. And we can remember how it was before that happened, but really what we're going to do now is take what we learned and move forward, because the one silver lining of a terrible relationship or anything bad that happens to us, I wouldn't wish it on anyone, but when it's happened, you can begin to see what are your tender spots, where is your unhealed trauma, what is your vulnerability to abuse. So it points you to where you can begin to heal and work on that. Now, I teach these techniques, the daily practice, to start unpacking and releasing the fearful and resentful thoughts and beliefs about yourself and the world that would have you, impulsively following decisions in your life that are more driven by trauma than by what you really want or what's good for you or what is going to bring love into your life. Of course, we want love in your life. You absolutely deserve to have a good, loving person who appreciates you for who you are. So this happened. Wash it out of your hair. And I really encourage you to get extremely active and structured in your approach to healing from the trauma that would allow this to happen to you. If it happens once, it kind of increases the odds that it's going to happen again, especially afterwards. It's weird how it works like that. It's almost like it forms a magnetic groove in you. and you very easily can fall right into the same thing. Or you could change the pattern, but a lot of times that takes a conscious effort to change that pattern. So it's conscious effort time. And you got in touch with me, which is so brave, and I do hope very much that what I'm saying to you can help you believe in yourself enough to take action. I'm going to also recommend you have no contact at all, even if it requires a restraining order with this person. This is just flat out toxic. So you had said, I don't know what to grieve, the woman you thought you loved, the relationship you thought you had, or the person you were before you met. You get to grieve. That is what heartbreak is. And the good news is what feels like it's about the other person is usually more about the ideal that we had. And the ideal with that person has been lost, but it's been revealed for what it is. And the beautiful relationship that you crave still lies ahead of you. And all you need to do to become ready for it is to heal. A trauma bond is a kind of intense attachment that develops through what's called intermittent reinforcement. A parent or a partner switches on the love and then turns it off. They get really super loving again, and then they turn into a monster. And that's when the really bad behavior happens and they treat you badly. But instead of making you want to run away and get to safety, trauma bonds can just like grab hold of your emotions and cause you to bond even more tightly to that person. And then you become like an addict who wants the next hit of so-called love. It's a form of what I call crap fit. Have you heard me say this word? Crap fit is when people with childhood PTSD get too good at fitting themselves to crap. We learn to stuff down our emotions and our better judgment in order to tolerate intolerable behavior and stay in unbearable relationships. And the reason we're so good at it is we learned it during childhood. It was a survival strategy. If you had a mentally ill or an abusive parent, what choice did you have but to love them no matter what, to just cope with it? But are you still crap fitting? With my students, we sometimes laugh at the word crap fit because it's a funny word, but when you're doing it, adapting yourself to and going into denial about intolerable people and behaviors, it can absolutely destroy your life and ruin any chances of happiness. Now, healing is possible, but it starts with getting very honest with yourself. And most of us, to make that transition to self-honesty, need support. So today I'm reading a letter from a young woman I'll call Melanie, and she writes, Dear Anna, if you do decide to respond to this letter, feel free to skip the background information. And so I was going to skip the background information and go right into the today problem, but it was a situation where I think the background is really relevant that explains a lot about how she got to this situation. So I'm going to start with reading her present time, and then I'll read you the background. All right. Almost 3 years ago, I moved into a shared house, which I live in now, and I met a man 9 years older than me, I'll call Miles. When we met, he was in a great place emotionally, but he'd suffered a lot of trauma in his past, a seriously abusive brother and a father who committed suicide, leaving Miles to find him. Our relationship has taught me so much, and I feel like I've truly been in love for the first time. He's so much like my dad was, it's kind of scary, but there are some serious problems. After the first 6 months, he came off his meds and he got really sick again. His severe anxiety and depression came back. When he's sick, he barely leaves the house and uses weed to cope. He has no friends. I'm the only person in his life apart from his mom, who lives in another country, and his 3 housemates. There were a lot of problems in our relationship, and we ended up breaking up after 9 months. We got back together a month later, and then COVID happened. Over lockdown, we grew so close, and when things are good between us, he is someone I could see myself being with the rest of my life. He's kind, sensitive, compassionate, patient, knowledgeable. We laugh for hours. We can talk for 8 hours, and it feels like 30 minutes. But when things are bad, they're bad. He has a seriously bad temper. When he becomes angry, he's irrational, manipulative, and cruel. He laughs at me, and honestly, he becomes a bully. I'm pretty sure he has CPTSD too, but he hasn't been diagnosed. It takes hardly anything to set him off, and once he goes, he goes. He screams, punches walls. It's awful. When he gets angry, I feel powerless. I don't feel scared, but I feel bullied. I feel like my words mean nothing because anything I say, he twists and mocks and shouts over me, but if I cut him off, he screams to get out. He knows I have serious issues around abandonment, but he does it anyway. I feel like I've been so patient. I've tried everything to help him. He needs serious help. He has extremely complex mental health needs, and he's pretty certain he has autism too. I don't want to imagine my life without him, but if I saw a woman being treated by their partner the way he treats me when he's angry, I'd be horrified. I'd probably call the police. And the awful thing is, Miles would too. When he's not filled with rage, he understands all of these things, but he has no control of himself. For context, apart from the emotional and verbal abuse, he shows no other abusive tendencies like control, trying to isolate, physical harm, or threats, etc. My question is, what do I do? Do I leave because of how horrifically damaging his rage is, or should I continue trying to help him with his triggers and mental health? Okay. So I was going to answer that, and some of you can sort of anticipate probably where I'm going to go with that, but I wanted to read Melanies' background. I think this explains so much, and I think it will help inform how I talk to Melanie about what she can do about this. Okay. From as far back as I remember, she wrote, my dad was the center of my world. I adored him, and we were incredibly close. However, he had a business in another country, so he would fly back and forth, spending weekends with us and weekdays in the other country. My mom started physically and emotionally abusing me when I was about 6. This carried on until I was 13. She never did it when my dad was around, but I would often call him, sobbing, begging him on the phone to come and save me. He always told me she shouldn't be doing this, but looking back, I don't understand why he didn't do anything. He was an incredible father, but that piece just doesn't make sense. My mom began drinking heavily when I was around 10, and as you can imagine, the abuse got worse. We were having serious money problems at the time, with bailiffs coming to the door, and my mom drinking and taking Valium to try and cope. She had multiple affairs, which I witnessed as she would bring some of the men home. One of them was a friend of mine. One was a teacher of mine. My dad knew none of this. I was tempted to tell him several times, but at the last moment, I'd back out. At the time, I had pretty bad social anxiety, but for the most part, I was just a normal kid growing up and adjusting. Then when I was 15, my dad had a seizure. It was just me and him in the house, and I found him lying on the sofa. I have pretty traumatic memories of that because he was shouting for me a few times and I'd ignored him, thinking it wasn't anything important. It ended up being a brain tumor. He had many seizures over the next few months and even had one while he was driving and ended up in the hospital. The whole thing was incredibly traumatic. His personality changed. He went from being a sweet, gentle man to an aggressive and strange one. I was numb for that whole year until he died, and by the time I properly realized what had happened, it was too late. After he died, the abuse from my mom went from 5 to 500. It was relentless emotional and verbal abuse for 3 years until I moved out to escape. Either she was cruel or she was suicidal. I never knew which version I'd get when I got home. She'd go from telling me she wished I was never born, that she hated me, that I was a loser with no friends, to telling me she wanted to die. My sister was away at university, so it was just me and my mom. I was pretty good at blocking out what she said, but I remember the day I broke. It was like all of the defenses shattered with a few of her usual hateful words, and everything she ever said got inside. The next few years of my life were chaotic and painful. I was self-harming constantly and ended up in a string of toxic long-term relationships back to back. The first was at 16 after my dad died. Each one lasted about a year. I'm almost 25 now. And with Miles. All right, Melanie. What a hard childhood you had. I'm so sorry. That's so unjust that this happened to you. And I can totally understand that you'd be with a guy like Miles and that it would be confusing to you. I circled so many things. Like, I don't like to be just, obvious and trite with this, but there are so many parallels between how he's treating you and what you went through as a teenager with your parents. And starting with, so I want to talk about trauma bonding. Trauma bonding is when somebody switches it on and it's great, and then they turn terrible on you. And that's what you say about your mom. You never knew who you were going to see. Your dad, you're saying he was so great, he loved you, and he was an incredible father, except that you told him that your mom was abusing you and he didn't do anything. So right there, that's a crap fit move where you adjusted yourself to just believe in your dad and see him as this great guy, even though really, honestly, any good parent would be gravely concerned about the other parent abusing the kids, and that they call and beg for help. That would be gravely concerning. And if, you know, I don't know what it was with him, but he didn't respond. He totally let you down. And I'm so sorry, but he totally let you down. And then your mom was drinking. There were money problems, the affairs with people you knew and everything. What absolute chaos, what a total lack of boundaries. And your dad didn't know. And yet, how could he not know? You were tempted to tell him. You were trying to, I totally get that. I remember trying to take care of my dad's feelings too when I was a kid. When I knew that stuff that was going on with my mom was going to upset him. And I didn't want him to be upset. I felt like even when I was a little kid, I had to protect his feelings. So I'm really sorry that you had to do that. I totally get it. And you had social anxiety. Well, yeah, but that you had some normalcy as a kid. And then when you were 15, your dad had a seizure and it was brain cancer. So something that was interesting is that you have all this guilt and trauma about that because he was shouting for help a few times and you ignored him thinking it wasn't anything important. So he was like, help, help. And probably some idea that you could have saved him, which if it was a brain tumor, you couldn't have. You know, it just was going to progress as it was going to progress. So it's not your fault. But I can imagine how traumatic that experience would be of finding out how serious it was and having not come to his aid right away. And it just reminds me of the last thing you wrote about your boyfriend here. Do I leave because of how horrifically damaging his rage is, or should I continue trying to help him with his triggers and mental health? So this desire to help, we'll come back to that. Then this thing where you didn't know who your mom was going to be and the abuse escalated and you got out. Good job, you got out. And and your sister went to university, so you both got out, and that's great. And then one day it's like something broke, and it seems like that happens sometimes, that we can sort of contain a lot of childhood trauma, and then one day, boom, it just, like maybe a new trauma happens or something triggers it and it comes out and we can't really get the genie back in the bottle. That happened for me when I was assaulted on the street. Like I was managing kind of okay, and then I couldn't at all. It was all just coming up. So I just understand you. I understand you and I relate, and I think you've done an amazing job of holding it together despite a truly horrific childhood that you didn't deserve. It's not your fault. So I wanted to come back to what you said here about your current relationship. 3 years ago, you moved in and to share a house where you live with a man who is 9 years older. And when you met, he was in a great place emotionally, but he'd suffered a lot of trauma in the past. Abusive brother, father committed suicide. That's very serious. Interesting little resonance there with your mom's suicide threats. Our relationship has taught me so much, you say, and that's often what people say in abusive relationships, that they learned so much. And I feel like I've truly been in love for the first time. So I get it, though. The relationship's over and you're taking stock of what was valuable to you. You learned a lot. You were in love. He's so much like my dad was, it's kind of scary. So when you say that, you're probably talking about good qualities, but I would just say your dad is somebody who totally abandoned you again and again and again, and especially when you needed him. So, and then you say, but there are some serious problems. And you say after the first 6 months, he came off his meds and got really sick again. Sounds similar to your mom, who was mentally unstable too. His severe anxiety and depression came back. When he's sick, he barely leaves the house and uses weed to cope. He has no friends. I'm the only person in his life apart from his mom, who lives in another country, and his 3 housemates. So I don't know. I think for someone who's been so severely abandoned and abused, and as you have been, that sometimes being needed that much, like being somebody's only person, can kind of help you feel whole or focused or something. I could see the appeal in that. But of course, for a healthy relationship, it would be a terrible idea to get together with somebody who you're their only person besides their housemates, and somebody and a parent who lives in another country. Then you say there were a lot of problems in our relationship. Okay, that's, sure, of course. And we ended up breaking up after 9 months. We got back together a month later, then COVID happened, and over lockdown, we grew so close. And when things are good between us, he's someone I could see myself being with for the rest of my life. So I think one of the things about lockdown, especially when it was so intense, is that for some people, it took a lot of pressure off. Like for some people, it intensified pressure because of being stuck together at home. For some people, it took the pressure off, people who get dysregulated by having to be out in the world and deal with people. So it sounds like it might have been kind of a helpful phenomenon for you. But of course, you can't just stay in lockdown for the rest of your life. And so then you said, he's kind, sensitive, compassionate, patient, knowledgeable. We laugh for hours. We can talk for 8 hours and it feels like 30 minutes. All right. But when things are bad, they're bad. So this is where we're talking about trauma bonding. Trauma bonding. So it's so great. He talks and laughs. You're so connected and close. And then all of a sudden it goes bad. It also sounds a bit like your mom, right? To become totally abusive. He has a serious bad temper. When he becomes angry, he's irrational, manipulative, and cruel. Again, sounds like your mom. He laughs at you. And honestly, he became a bully. I'm pretty sure he has CPTSD too, probably. But if you love somebody with CPTSD, that's a totally important criteria, is that they recognize it and do something about it. And don't just keep acting out on it and expecting you to fit yourself to it, right? So it takes hardly anything to set him off, and once he goes, he goes. He screams, punches walls. It's awful. When he gets angry, I feel powerless. I don't feel scared, but I feel bullied. Well, I think it's interesting that you don't feel scared. That doesn't sound rational to me. Somebody punching walls is pretty terrifying, and it's physical violence. It hasn't been targeted at you yet, but you're only with him 9 months, and I would just say chances seem very high to me it would escalate to that pretty easily. And with that level of rage, no way. No way. That is not a place to be. I feel like my words mean nothing, you said, because anything I say he twists and mocks and shouts over me, but if I cut him off, he screams at me to get out. Okay. Hardcore emotional abuse. It doesn't have to be physical abuse to be abuse. Emotional abuse will also ruin your life. And emotional abuse causes CPTSD, and emotional abuse drives people to the point that they don't want to live anymore. Emotional abuse is unacceptable. All right. He knows I have serious issues around abandonment, which we understand, but he does it anyway. So there's that part of you that's thinking, but he knows he's a rational person. And if he knows I have a sensitivity, of course he would take care of me. But see, he's too far gone. He's too far gone that if he knows or cares, this part of him just takes over and becomes abusive. An abusive guy doesn't care and doesn't take care of you and could kill you. He has extremely complex mental health needs, and he's pretty certain he has autism also. Well, it sounds terrible, okay? It just sounds completely unworkable. So you say, I don't want to imagine my life without him. And I understand that. It's for a person with abandonment. The reason that's so hard to imagine is because it triggers that abandonment melange of intense grief and rage and panic. And it's so much more intense than what normal people experience. And I know about it. I have it too. It's not your fault you have it. You didn't make your brain like that. It's a neurological reaction that gets triggered. But I'll tell you what, when you have a name for it, abandonment melange, it's a thing. It's a thing that's really common. You can read a really good work about it in Pete Walker's book, CPTSD, From Surviving to Thriving. I'll throw a link to that below. I think he coined the phrase abandonment melange. And the first time I heard that, I was like, I know exactly what that is. And once you know what it is, then you can notice when it's happening. You can go, oh, this is abandonment melange. That's why I'm having this totally over the top horrible feeling about this. Because when it's on us, we just feel like we have to go to any lengths to make the abandonment stop, including put up with abuse. That's what happens. So you say, I don't want to imagine my life without him, but that's why you can. Once you know it's abandonment melange, you can accept it and you can let it wash over you like a wave. You will be absolutely okay. You're a 25-year-old person. You will be okay. You can do this. And you're going to need support, right? But you say, if you saw a woman being treated by their partner the way he treats you when he's angry, you'd be horrified. You'd probably call the police. So that right there is you being able to stand outside yourself and just see, this is horrible. Police should be called. This is criminal what's going on. It's not safe at all. You say the awful thing is he would do that too. He would think that too. When he's not filled with rage, he understands all of these things. Well, people who fill up with rage and can't be counted on to understand these things are the people who end up murdering their partners. But he has no control of himself. For context, apart from the emotional and verbal abuse, he shows no other abusive tendencies: control, trying to isolate, physical harm and threats, etc. Okay, so I'm going to be really tough love. Those are famous last words of people who are abused by intimate partner violence. You know, it's this bad, but it's not this bad. But it tends to escalate. That's what happens. So when you say, my question is, what do I do? I would really encourage you to call and get the help of a women's shelter. I don't think you need a shelter like you've already broken up. It's not that you need somewhere to go, but I really encourage you to avail yourself of the kind of help that is special for a person who has been abused, because it's an unusual kind of psychology. It can be very irrational. It can be very sticky. It's very hard to get out. Your mind will say, no, 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 I have to go back. And he might invite you back. It's very hard to leave, but that kind of help can be life-saving. And beyond that, it can help you build your life back and just kind of get your perception back. When I say back, I realize that it was taken from you at such a young age, but it's in there. You have demonstrated through all of these things, including writing this letter that's very lucid, that your spirit is intact, that a lot of these mechanisms, the trauma bonding, the crap fitting, the going into denial about how bad everything is and thinking there's a way that you can help him heal. Because I would just say, well, how's that working for you? You've been working really hard trying to help him heal. How's that working for you? He's not healed. And I would just say, take it from Miss Anna. When people are sick in this way, you can't help them. You can't help them. People have to want some help themselves, or they need to be locked up. And it's a case for professional help at this point. And it sounds like there's a lot of isolation there, and it doesn't look like it's going to get better anytime soon. You, on the other hand, you have a future ahead of you, and there are so many things you can change so that you never have this kind of relationship again. So yes, help from counselors or a women's shelter where they have experience with people who have been emotionally abused and have been around physical violence, even if it wasn't directed at them. You didn't say whether you're in therapy, but after everything you've been through, I just really encourage you to find effective, strong, positive, forward-thinking support for the changes you're trying to make in your life. It's really important to have people who can give you a reality check on your perception. When, as a child, your perceptions were always denied. No, that's not going on. Everything's fine. My dad's a great dad. You know, all that denial, it can really throw you off from pursuing things in a good and positive way. And you end up letting back in people in your life. I have a dating course you might want to check out that walks you through steps to identify how did you end up getting together with people who are unworkable, and how can you identify the traits in somebody that would mean that they're suitable for you. So that walks you through that. You could check that out. That link will be down below. You might want to go to a 12-step program. A 12-step program means you can go to meetings every day and you can make friends with other people who are also trying to heal. And many of them have had problems similar to yours. When you have friends to hang out with and a meeting to go to every night, you never have to hang on to a relationship. Because, I mean, honestly, how many relationships did you hold on to just because you were afraid to be alone? Maybe all of them or a lot of them, right? If you're like me, a lot of them. You don't want to be alone. But if you have friends who are always there and you always know where to go and everybody goes out to dinner afterwards, you don't need to hold on to a bad relationship. It's a lot easier to just let them roll right past you. And then take your time and start to do the recovery work of healing. Start to do that work that helps you become more fully yourself while you're outside of a relationship, more clear about what would be a good match for you and more structured so that you can proceed slowly and not move in together after 3 months like before. That's for people with CPTSD. That's a really common thing that we do. We kind of rush in and get all enmeshed with people. Then we get to know them and we're like, what have I done? How do I get out? So if you can avoid moving in together, actually, if you can avoid sleeping together for quite a while, that will help give you that emotional mobility to date them, get to know them, find out if their red flags are waving, and proceed slowly and with the support of friends. And that, I'm walking you through the future of dating because I just know that that's probably a big concern. Like, can that ever happen again? It totally can. But just remember, the unhealed person who rushes out and dates again when they haven't really healed from what happened before tends to create the same kind of relationship, even though they don't want to. I can't tell you how many times I got broadsided by my own choices, didn't see it coming. The healing has to happen, and you might be thinking, as I did, but how? How do you do that? One place you can start is come into my daily practice. It's a free course. It's free. I do Zoom calls with anybody who's taken that course every 2 weeks. And the calls are wonderful. We use the techniques together. They help calm your emotions and your dysregulation. You rest your mind and you get some clarity. And if you do that twice a day like I do, boy, progress becomes very possible. And it's totally compatible with anything else you want to do to progress your healing therapy or, somatic treatments, cognitive behavior therapy, DBT, all kinds of things that people do are compatible. Anything at all is compatible. So those are my suggestions to you, Melanie. I really wish you well, and I wish you strength. And unequivocally, yes, shut the door on that relationship. Good for you for getting out. There's one kind of romantic relationship that I wouldn't wish on anyone, and that's the kind that's been made intense by a trauma bond. If you were abused or neglected as a kid, you've probably been through it, and I want to help you make sure it never happens again. So what is a trauma bond? It's another name for a dynamic that's also called intermittent reinforcement, where one person gives intense affection and approval to the other person, and then alternates it with neglect and disapproval and abandonment, or even sometimes abuse. Now, you would think that this kind of emotional on-off torture, just blowing hot and cold to the point of cruelty, would drive away prospective partners, right? I mean, this ugly treatment should signal major danger to anyone who actually wanted to be loved. But that's exactly where people traumatized as kids are vulnerable. And if that's you, you probably recognize right away what I'm talking about, whether you had a name for it when it happened to you or not. And you've already noticed that when someone treated you like this, loving you, then turning cold and betraying you over and over, back, forth, it has this insidious power to hook your mind, to grab onto your heart and keep you obsessed and sad and feeling too messed up to get out. I'm Anna Runkle, also known as the Crappy Childhood Fairy, and I teach people how to spot and heal symptoms of complex trauma, including that blind spot that a lot of us develop around toxic romantic relationships, including trauma bonds. Now, trauma bonding can, in theory, happen to anyone. In warfare, it's a form of psychological manipulation that's used on prisoners of war to break them down and get them to abandon their loyalty to their own cause and to their own self-interest, and instead to become completely dedicated to serving their captors. It's a terrible thing to do to a person because it's playing on deep wiring from infancy. It's a survival tactic to do whatever it takes to stay protected and connected to a parent, even if that parent is abusive. And it's interesting, that you can trip that wire in an adult, that it's still there, because in adulthood, clinging to a destructive relationship is just a pure maladaptation. And it reminds me of the way that mistreated animals stay loyal to abusive owners. It's like an involuntary reflex. When I was 6 years old, I went to a little roadside attraction once where they had chickens in wire cages, and you could put like a dime, that's how long ago it was, you could put a dime in the slot, and an electric current would run through the wires and make the chickens dance. They would jump around. There'd be this little tinny music playing, and it came out of just this little machine attached to their cages. And I'll never forget that. I was totally charmed for the first 5 seconds. And then I asked my brother, like, how do they train chickens to dance? And he explained to me it's an electric shock. And then I realized, like, I had shocked the chickens. I had made it start by putting my little dime in the slot, and then I couldn't make it stop. And it was very traumatic for me, that poor chicken just jumping around in there. So trauma bonding is like a groove in your psyche that can form in your childhood when a parent, sometimes intentionally, but usually for reasons beyond their control, when they can only give love and attention to you some of the time. And if they're caught up in alcoholism or addiction, it's very common to be super loving one moment and then suddenly they're totally out of it. From your perspective, it's sudden. And they might be rageful, they might be passed out, they might be behaving dangerously. Then they sober up again and they're so sorry and they want to make it up to you. Or they're in some psychological state where that sorry phase never comes. They're just sort of there, there's food, and then there isn't. And a kid learns to hang on to every tiny sign that the parent loves them, every little crumb of praise or attention. And it very easily does long-lasting damage to a kid's emotions and to your self-concept, right? And when you grow up, it shows up as a crazy high tolerance for the same kind of treatment from partners. It shows up as an attraction to unavailable people, as love addiction, as a willingness to stay, and even an inability to leave abusive people, abusive partners. And none of this, it's not like it's fulfilling. It's not like it makes you happy. None of it is happy. None of it is happy. It's a mental hook. It creates a sense of dread about losing the relationship that feels worse than the pain of being in the relationship. And it's completely unrealistic. The fact is, you could leave, but you don't. And there's a compulsion in trauma bonding to keep trying and trying, that if you could just figure out the right words, the right behaviors, the right responses, you could win the love of this hot and cold person and not have to deal with leaving. And then maybe the love would get switched on for good. But of course, it never works out like that, right? Now, some of you watching this will have been through a trauma bond relationship with someone very dominating who did this to you. And some of you will have done this to another person, in fact. And it's true that there are people who study these tactics and do them on purpose. But I think the vast majority of the time, it's not anything planned out. It's a dynamic that develops between two people who've been conditioned in the past to have an intense emotional response to abandonment, to high drama. So yes, there could be abuse, and if you're in an abusive relationship, I'm going to tell you flat out to get out of it. But in this video, I'm talking not about abuse per se, but about an unhealthy, unhappy dynamic where one partner isn't reliable or committed or equally into the other, and the result for the other partner is to be hooked. And honestly, this can go two ways. Two people can be hooked in, creating drama and the threat that the relationship is ending periodically, maybe just to get that intense result of things coming back together strongly. So obviously that's a drain. It's very hard on people. But with an abandoner especially, that intense feeling of relief and pleasure that when you're allowed to come back into the arms of the person who abandoned you, it feels like the greatest love of all time. But it's not. It's not actually love. It's a bug in the system. It's not a feature, it's a bug. It's one of your conditioned responses that makes you hold on for dear life when you feel threatened with being alone and rejected. It feels like love, but it's more like the dance of that chicken in the cage that I saw when I was a kid. It's an involuntary response to a yucky stimulus. So in other words, if you get hooked in a trauma bond with someone blowing hot and cold, if that's happened to you, it was involuntary. It's not your fault. And I want you to get out of the shame and self-attack that you've maybe been carrying about these relationships, and there can be a lot of shame. You've been hooked on someone, and all your friends can see the person doesn't treat you well. They tell you to leave. You know they're right on some level, but it feels impossible. But here's why I want you to be strong and to open up to learning some strategies to get free, if that's what you want. Because for people with CPTSD, the more time we spend living on the emotional crumbs on the roller coaster in a trauma bond, the harder it is to change. You'll be driven to try to handle it better when you're in that kind of relationship, but you don't want to get good at handling this lousy treatment. You want to be bad at it. You want to give voice to the part of you that still knows that this is not what you're meant for. This isn't what you want. You were born to be loved. You are designed to thrive when you're safe and accepted and supported, just like when you were a kid. That's what you were meant for. And if you're in a relationship where you don't have those things, then effectively you're blocked from your full development. And so it's so important for you to heal and change that dynamic, either by getting out of that relationship or no longer contributing to the high drama dynamic. Because it takes two to be in a trauma bond. And if you're not literally captive to someone, you're the only one who can change the way that you relate to that other person. It's you. You can start with you. They don't even have to be agreeable to change for you to begin your change. And you don't really know how it's going to turn out. You've got to fight your attachment to the idea that somehow the other person will be the one to make it change, or that someone else will come riding into the view to save you. You're going to save you. That's the first thing to understand. The second thing is to address the void in your life that makes the drama and loneliness of a trauma bond seem like something you'd want at all. And if that's happening for you, I'd wager that you're also suffering from a lack of connection with other people in your life. Maybe you're ashamed of your relationship and you're hiding or keeping people at arm's length so they won't judge you, but you need a friend or two. Everyone does. You need people who you can tell what's really going on, who you can be honest with. Just because you're in a hard relationship doesn't mean you have to leave, doesn't mean you have to be ashamed of not having left. Sometimes just being connected with other people reduces the pressure on the relationship. It reduces the need that you have for that relationship to be everything for you. And sometimes that's enough to produce a positive change in the dynamic. This is especially true when two people who love each other and want to be in a relationship are still trauma bonding to some degree by fighting, going through drama, the acting out the whole thing of it's over and coming back together. And even using those upsets to then trigger the happy reunion, if we can call it that, the removal of the threat of breakup and the restoration of harmony. It's a mini kind of trauma bond in itself. A couple could go their whole life doing this, but if you have CPTSD, it's going to create a constant pull, like backward on your healing progress. It's a constant trigger, reactivating your dysregulation and trauma wounds. Peace is a better goal. Connection is a better goal. If you're in a relationship you want to preserve and you both want peace, you can reduce the drama by drawing a hard line against dramatic statements and threats to the future of the relationship. If you ever do need to leave, you'll do it, but there's no need to threaten it or keep talking about it. If you don't threaten the relationship, you're also not going to get the high of that happy reunion, and what's left there is what's going to feel kind of empty. And what goes in that emptiness is a whole bunch of communication. And it takes time, but you can start to strengthen your genuine bond and not have it be so dependent on adrenaline and endorphins to feel real to you. If you're in a relationship where you're actually not loved, though, and you're aware the right thing really is to leave, then getting support from friends to make your transition out as quietly and intentionally and as drama-free as possible will help prevent a re-triggering of the trauma bond. Having friends and practicing your connection makes leaving much more doable. Without friends, it feels unthinkable, right? But with friends, you can envision a life where you're going to be okay. You might say, oh, I don't have friends, but that's often a consequence of being in a high drama relationship. That is something you can start to work on right now. When you've made a friend or two, then you have people to hang out with. You know you won't always be alone. Maybe you even have a place to stay while you sort your life out. Now, a trauma bond is in many ways like a drug addiction, and there will be withdrawal. There are strategies that you can use to exit smoothly and with as little drama and retriggering as possible. And I teach that in my dating and relationships course. I also teach how you can change your patterns and do the work to be ready for something lasting and real in the future. And I'll put a link below so you can check out that course if you like. You can learn to date differently and to be with a different kind of person. You can be conscious next time. You can support yourself in having a happy life next time and have clarity and not fall into your old pattern and not get involved with abusive or unavailable people. Healing is possible. I want you to feel that in your bones. Healing is possible for you. You have a life ahead where you can be safe and loved, and you deserve that. You're meant for it. Sometimes people acknowledge being codependent very lightly, as if it's just a small thing. And it's true, it's possible to be just a little bit preoccupied with another person and slightly lacking in awareness of oneself. But this cognitive imbalance can grow into a life-consuming monster, especially when it's combined with trauma bonding. Now, when love is given and taken away again and again, it can drive a person with codependent tendencies to almost completely lose their sense of reality. Has this happened to you? You lose yourself. When people ask if you're taking care of yourself, it sounds like dumb psychobabble. And you come to think that no one can understand the urgency and the complexity of this other person who keeps hurting you. And you have to keep secrets because you know on some level your behavior looks crazy to other people. And it feels like you're on a mission to break through to this other person. It feels like redemptive love is just around the corner if you could just get over this one last hurdle, their addiction, the fact they say they don't care about you, the obvious signs that their self-destruction or outright abuse will destroy your life and that it's in fact dangerous. You think these hurdles are just things other people worry about, but that you know better, and you think any minute now the beautiful moment will arrive when all this trouble is cleared away and you can be safe and seen and cherished at last. And I know what this feels like, and I know where it leads. So I want to talk about the deadly mix of codependence and trauma bonding in the language that someone who's in the middle of it will understand. My letter today is from a woman who I'll call Casey, and she writes, "Dear Anna, for 1.5 years, I've dated a man off and on who has a liquor/alcohol addiction." Got the pencil here. I'm going to be circling things I'm going to come back to. I'll read all the way through though so that we can just get a feel for what's going on with Casey, and I'll see if I can help. All right, 1.5 years off and on dating a guy with a liquor/alcohol addiction. However, he can still treat me horribly with beer, a lack of sleep, stress, or of lately me setting boundaries as I learned to do. I've been putting up with it. The hot, cold, Jekyll and Hyde, love-bomby, discardy, quote, relationship, because he said things like, "You're saving me. You saved me. I want to heal you." Something that you, Anna, referred to in another video as exactly what the woman in that letter wanted to hear, and the guy knew it. And also, the guy that I like, says Casey, is so damn funny and intelligent. If only he could use his manipulation tactics for good, I hear myself saying often. I hear that you have a sense of humor in there, even if it's not funny. The best things he said are trumped by, "I want to beat you to death in your sleep. If I were to cheat, of course I wouldn't tell you, but I'd know." All of which he denies. "I didn't say that," he'll blast, followed by a 4-day rocky period from him if I bring it up. Due to my codependent and currently mushy and unsure nature, I'm still in the thralls of this person. However, it's getting worse, despite less time together, and his best friend in the whole world just had a seizure last week, and the CAT scan disclosed a quarter-sized cancerous tumor next to the most important life-giving nerve. He may die during surgery, which is soon. He may never speak again if he lives. He may never be the same, and certainly his family situation has already been drastically affected. It's a scary and sad time. However much I want to be there for my ex or boyfriend, very unclear here. However much I want to be there for my ex while he's there for his precarious friend, he has become increasingly hurtful, rude, and has begun throwing things like wrapped food, fiddleheads and wontons last night at me, yelling, swearing, and trying to really show everyone around, like neighbors, how unsupportive and dramatic I am by yelling things like, "Don't touch me," when I try to calm him. He'll yell that my shaking is fake, that my tears are crocodiles, and that I'm manipulating everyone into thinking I'm a victim. I don't talk about this to anyone. I only have one friend and she has a family, and the time we spend together, I'd like to be positive. Oh yeah, and he removed a condom twice without my consent. I stopped being intimate with him after that, and he has physically hurt me, but by accident, when angry and on alcohol 3 times, and most definitely kicked me out when we were dating to phone other women who he referred to later when confronted about it as sweethearts and also disgustingly ugly. I can almost hear your fairy pencil circling this whole paragraph. Okay, here we go. I'm going to circle the whole paragraph. You can see my eyebrows are like, what? Circle, 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 circle. Okay. All right. His past consists of alcoholic parents who enable and or don't listen to him, a suicide on alcohol by his best friend at the time, another one later, and verbal and mental abuse at the hands of what seems like almost all his family, a stint in a hospital of some hidden sort, multiple arrests for resisting and DUIs. Oh, just writing it, I'm cringing. There is no way I'd let a daughter of mine deal with this. I'm 41 and been in 3 long-term abusive alcoholic relationships where I was cheated on and used as a babysitter. I had codependent and alcoholic parents, both with narcissistic traits, but overall loving, and they tried. Oh, I almost forgot. One parent cheated on the other since I was 2, and apparently I'd sit on one's lap as they argued about it. I also have a pretty hard-to-shake eating disorder and other unhealthy traits. What do I do, Anna? He is verbally abusive, moody as hell, yet going through one of the worst times in his life. Depressed, no money, friend possibly leaving him forever. Me too. I think she means she might leave him too. Turmoil in his mind, nightmares, etc. When he says mean things, I say, why don't you focus on friends you love and trust instead of me? Yet he'll ignore it and act nice for a few days and then resume his rather narcissistic habits to the point where I cry. And I'm not a crier. I'm a stifler and a flighter. He's threatened to blow his head off. He's overdosed on depression medicine he briefly took with a ton of liquor and had to call the ambulance, who put me on his I'm okay show for, and not to sound wimpy, but walking in on him that ambulance night has caused issues with my own mental health, along with the utter confusion at the nice/mean cycles, the gaslighting. Thank you for teaching me, Casey says. Jumping at slightest sound, keeping lights off, and leaving car down the street. So he thinks I'm not home, depression, inability to function normally, lots of staring and procrastinating, thinking maybe my reality isn't real, etc. How do I support him? And then in parentheses, and myself, I add during the final review of this letter, during his time of need without being codependent, or hurting him further by omitting myself from his life. I've tried for 4 months to get a few days of space and a legit breakup/friendship. And I've told him he can't treat me like that and expect me to stay around. I can say it, but I feel awful for not being there for him right now, for not at least saying I love you and good night. I feel like such a total jerk. What if he actually needs a hug? He rarely will give me one when I ask, but what if he does right now? I'm always up for a hug and love. I'm torn. Could you please advise? Again, thank you. Just writing this and feeling myself cringe has helped. Casey. Okay. Oh, this is one of the most painful letters I've read. Because Casey, I think that you may have really, really lost touch with reality here. And so, I want to give you some really tough love, but I realize that I think you might be in a very delicate state. And I'm going to try to make it really gentle. And first, I'm just going to say, I do understand. I'm going to ask everybody here who comments, go easy on her. It doesn't help anybody to get shamed about this. She asked, I have to admit a little bit when I read this, I wondered if I was being punked. Just because it made no sense that you're saying, how do I support him and myself? It sounded like a caricature of somebody who's so codependent they can't see the thing that's right in front of them. So let's just go through it. I'm going to tell you what you said. I'm just going to take you at face value that this is really what you're suffering with. Okay. So for 1.5 years, dated a man on and off. Okay, those are keywords. On and off dating. With all the crap going on here, you're talking about a trauma bond. So you do have the most extreme case of codependence I've ever witnessed. You're not in my life, but reading this, I don't think I've ever quite seen anything this extreme. I'm sure it's there. But there's also a trauma bond there, and a trauma bond and codependence together can be deadly, literally. So I want you to take what I'm saying really seriously. So you say he has a liquor/alcohol addiction. And so as somebody who has spent a lot of time around alcoholics, both drinking and sober, and gone to at least 1,000 open AA meetings and years of Al-Anon, I will just say that my observation is when people won't say the word alcoholism, they're in denial, okay? What liquor/alcohol addiction, liquor and alcohol, same thing. So is beer, by the way, when you say, but also he treats you bad on beer. It sounds to me like you have a very limited knowledge of what alcoholism is. So first thing I'm going to tell you is just get yourself to Al-Anon. Al-Anon is for people affected by other people's drinking, and it will help you to understand what the heck is going on and what can and can't be done for somebody. You have a very skewed idea of like what the problem is, where your energy belongs, what can be done about it. And that's a program where you can learn about that. There's like every 12-step program could be helpful in this case, but I would say go there, at least so you first understand alcohol so you can stop worrying. There's literally nothing you can do about his drinking. So I'm just going to tell you right now, and about his alcoholic behavior. You can't change him. And all this energy you spent trying for a year and a half, I'm sorry to tell you, you threw that time away, but it's not too late to stop. Okay. He has a liquor/alcohol addiction. However, he can still treat you horribly with beer, a lack of sleep, stress, or you setting boundaries. So in other words, what you're saying is he's an abusive alcoholic. And I would like you to just say that aloud to yourself. He is abusive and he's an alcoholic. All right. That may help frame it for you. That will help take away all the little hiding places you're trying to find with this long rationale of like what you think. It's just like you're rationalizing so much here. So interestingly, abusive alcoholic, like you had me at abusive alcoholic of like, yeah, what are you still doing there another minute? All right, that's the question here. So I'm going to read through everything you said, but I'm just going to go ahead and say it here. 95% of what you wrote is about him. You wrote about 2% about yourself and about 2% about his friend who's dying. And you had a lot more detail and awareness of suffering of the friend who's dying. And for yourself, you were just like, oh, eating disorder, and I'm kind of codependent. And you glossed right over who you are. And you know, if you've watched any of my videos, you know what's going to happen, Casey. I don't even care about this guy. I care about you. You are writing and asking for help. And what I'm going to tell you is all about getting all your focus and getting it right onto yourself on the one thing where you have the power to make a difference. You can't do anything about this guy. I know the fantasy. You know, I started out this video talking about, I know what it's like, just one last hurdle. If I could just get him to understand this one thing, you know, that this love is waiting for you. But that is your childhood trauma telling you completely bad dreams. It's just a bad dream. It's just this idea like that love is here. It couldn't possibly be anywhere else. It's here and you just have to fight this battle and win it. I know what it's like. I know what it's like, but that's what I'm for here. I got the pencil, I got my big mouth, and I give you the tough love and just, I read your own words to you. Okay, so you said, hot and cold, Jekyll and Hyde, love bomby, discardy, quote, relationship. And then he says, you're saving me, I want to heal you. So yeah, those are codependent seduction lines, really. Oh, it's working, you're saving me. Well, I just want to point out, Casey, you haven't saved him. And I'm just sort of being silly here, but saying you've done a terrible job of saving him. He's a mess. You failed. So it's good. You can quit your job now. You know, it's not going to work and it couldn't have worked. So don't worry. That idea that hook that you could save him, you know, I'm pretty sure it comes back. I think I had that, you know, I always felt like if I could be loving and nice enough, the person who was angry and suffering and mean and cruel to me, that they would come around. And there's, you know, that's like a legend in my mind of something that can happen. And it's like hitting your head against a wall. It's a very sad thing because all the love that you were ever going to get in life, you've just sacrificed it to just keep trying to get it out of this like terrible, ugly graffiti wall of crap. You know, there's no love here. All the love that you were going to get, you already had from this guy. And now it's just grief. It's grief and cruelty. And some part of you thinks you can shut that down. You can close your feelings off. You're being heroic. It's like, that's just, your trauma is just lying to you. And it's lying to you pretty bad. You know, I'm hearing just little hints of awareness here. When you say you're cringing, you can hear the fairy pencil. Like, you know, on some level, this is like, it's not real. What you're pursuing here, it's not real. I don't hear any evidence. Even if this guy, like, all he ever did was say he loved you, his problems are too great. This is not, you know, you don't have a big commitment to him. It's just somebody you've been seeing and sleeping with. That's all it is. And it's somebody who's treated you terribly and who's been unreliable and brought pain and drama. And you're saying you've had 3 now, abusive alcoholic relationships. So I just want to bring crystal clear into your mind. The problem here is you. The problem is your attraction to these terrible people who treat you badly. There's some kind of, some people call it repetition compulsion. Some people call it masochism. It doesn't matter what you call it. All that matters is that you stop it. You stop it at all costs. But I'll go through your letter. I'm just going to help you keep hearing what you said. You said that he alternated these things with, you saved me and I want to heal you. He alternated it with, and he's funny and intelligent. And you thought if only he could use his manipulation tactics for good. That is a codependent thought if I ever heard one. If only he used his giant cannon for good, whatever. Can't be done. That's not what cannons are for. They're not for good. They're for destroying things. I hear myself saying often, the best things, he said, are trumped by, I want to beat you to death in your sleep. Girl, I think you got to get out of there like right now. I think you have to get out. When you hear words like that and your denial is thinking that somehow they're kind of outweighed by when he says, I'm going to heal you. Has he healed you? Are you healed? Or you've described to me the symptoms of somebody who's in a constant state of complete deterioration, anxiety, and delusion. I don't think you're doing very well. Okay, so when he says, I want to beat you to death in your sleep, out the door. And there's a telling thing here later. I'll get to it. You also said he said this stuff about cheating, and then he denies he said it. That's what they always do. Don't worry. 4-day rocky period if you bring it up. So then you trained yourself, oh, I won't bring it up. I'll pretend it didn't happen. I don't want him to be mad because I might hurt him and I got to help him. Just calling you out here, Casey. This is quite serious. So due to your codependent and mushy and unsure nature, I'm still in the thralls of this person. However, it's getting worse despite less time together. Okay, it's getting worse. There's your sign. All right, there's your sign. Out. It's getting worse. You know what happens in abusive relationships as they're getting worse? They escalate. They escalate to something worse, and you must be out of there. It's just, okay? I almost never give direct hard advice like that, but when I hear somebody in danger, I'm just saying it. Out. Cut off all contact. This is like time to go to a women's shelter if you need to. Time to get serious help every day from people who understand, okay? So you're saying, I'm still in his thrall, and this thing about his best friend having this medical problem, and I just like, okay, his best friend has a medical problem. I hear you rationalizing why you have to cling to him, and you're clinging to him. I don't hear him clinging to you. He's kind of doing he's throwing wontons at you. He's saying he wants to beat you to death. This guy is not trying to work things out with you. He's not asking you to stay, but you're inventing a reality where he's not going to be okay without you. And I want to tell you something about alcoholics or addicts or people who are very unstable, is that being in a dramatic relationship with them can actually hurt them. So remaining in a dramatic relationship with them, you don't really know how bad it could be for them, but it can be very bad. What you're describing here is somebody, he's very vulnerable, he's suicidal. Girl, he could die, and you do not want to be the agent of drama bringing that to him. You are not his source of comfort. Everything you're describing here is just like a huge drama, emotional violence, horror show, relationship. It's not good for him to be part of this. He's not in a state where he can extract himself. You haven't been in a state where you can extract himself. This is like Sid and Nancy here. So who are you going to be? What can you do about this? You can get out. And I don't want to hear, I don't know how. Yes, you do. You put your shoes on and you go and you stop calling the guy. All right. So we'll get to the details of that. So you say it's a very scary and sad time. Not for you. It's a scary and sad time for a friend of a friend, this guy. Then you say, however much I want to be there for my ex, and you say ex and boyfriend, it's all mixed up, right? There's no boundary here. There's certainly no commitment. You want to be there for him while he's there for his precarious friend, his poor friend, if that's all he's got to support him. But I don't even care about those people. We don't know them. They're not asking for help, and they're not even asking for your help. So he's become increasingly hurtful, rude, throwing things, yelling, swearing. And this is where I think you're getting a little bit like distorted thinking here, trying to really show everyone around like neighbors how unsupportive and dramatic I am by yelling things like, don't touch me when I try to calm him. So I just want to tell you something. When somebody's upset, it's legitimate if they don't want to be touched. Your interpretation that he's trying to show the neighbors how unsupportive and dramatic you are, I'm just going to say that's a projection of your fear. You think that if you don't get in his good graces, you have failed to be supportive and calm, that you're being unsupportive and dramatic. And truth be known, you hanging on to this relationship with all of this kind of wild energy of like, you're going to fix it, it is unsupportive. It is dramatic. He doesn't need to show the neighbors anything. So he thinks that your behavior is manipulative, and codependence is manipulative. I'm not trying to like take his side or anything. He sounds really like such a big bummer that he thinks you're trying to manipulate everyone into thinking you're a victim. I think you have classic behavior of thinking like he's the designated patient and you're the reasonable, helpful one. That's what we do. That's what I have done when I've been in a somewhat similar situation. It's a delusion that we're just doing such a great thing for somebody, but actually we are right there in the trenches being just as whack, you know? It's a big mess. There really is no way out of it except, you know, sometimes by intervention, if you have friends to intervene. You told me I only have one friend. That is so normal for somebody who's in this type of relationship, an abusive relationship. One friend, and you don't tell her. You claim because you're trying to keep it positive. You're not telling her because you're trying to be nice or something. But I know why you're not telling her. You're hiding. You're hiding how messed up everything is. And I know this. I've been there. You know, like I know, because you told me, you read this to me, and you have this veil of anonymity on you, thankfully. But now you can hear this from me. You know, you're hiding because you're ashamed. Because anyone who could see what you're doing can see that you're doing a terrible thing to yourself and to your life. Anyone can see it. Okay. And I say that with all the love I can say of having been that girl. I've done that and I hid from everybody. And it's horrible because what happens when you're in an abusive relationship, and I mean a relationship where abuse is occurring, like I just don't see you as like, I just see you as having infinite choice not to be in this situation, but you're attached to an abuser and you're abusing yourself in effect. And when you're doing that, you're blotting out all friends. What's going to happen is when all of this falls apart, and it may have to be him who ends it if you won't, it'll end because he died, or it'll end because he finally does something so bad that you can't possibly go back, or he won't have you back. Like if that's what it's going to take, because that's what trauma bonds and codependence together create, it's like an impossible escape. So if that's what happens, you'll be there at one of the worst moments in your life needing a friend and you don't have a friend, and you were hiding from everybody what was really going on, having a fake relationship with them. This is where having CPTSD starts to get extremely dangerous, because when you have CPTSD and you have no support or nobody you can be honest with, your mind can take the trauma and kind of spin it up into something more than it is. This is where things can get violent. They can get where people like try to like publicly harm each other, make everybody think things about them. And I'm just going to recommend to you, because you wrote, I think you're like, you know, you're drowning and you're reaching up. And my hand is here going, come on, honey, Casey, it's time to come out. It's time to come out. And it's going to feel like withdrawal at first. It's going to be really hard. And your CPTSD and your codependence will, and the trauma bond will go like, I have to go back. I can't possibly feel okay on the planet Earth unless I'm back in this thing. And your mind will tell you, it's not because of me, it's because of him. He needs me. Oh, he'll die without me. It's just like, I'm just telling you right now, that's not what's really happening. This is what trauma brain tells you under these circumstances. And so there have to be other people helping you. And every time you go there, they can help bring you back. Now, hardly anybody, and especially if you've been in an abusive relationship, I'm going to bet you're not in good financial shape. I'm not hearing that you have a therapist or anywhere to go. So here's what you have. You have 12-step groups. They're free. They happen every day. You'll be very welcome there. What you're going through is so normal for somebody who grew up. You had an alcoholic and codependent mom, there was cheating, and they held you on their lap while they fought about it. You know, if I were a little girl and I were sitting on a lap with parents fighting about infidelity, you know what I would do? I would disassociate and I would pretend everything was okay. And that's what you're doing now. That's what you learned to do so well. And it's good you learned as a child, because it helped you survive that and have a spirit intact. But now is the time to stop that behavior. You don't dissociate, you stay present. You go, ow, when this person is abusive to me, it hurts and ruins my life. I will take myself out. When you were a kid, you couldn't leave, but now you can. So I'm just talking sense to you. I totally know what it's like. Trauma bond and codependence together. I totally know what it's like. Like your mind will not admit that that's good, and physical symptoms will come on. You'll have headaches, your body will ache, you'll be exhausted, but I promise you it will pass. If you know that that's coming and you can go, oh, this is what it is, it's withdrawal. Because, you know, we are physiological beings. Our trauma wounds are at the level of our nervous system, and trying to govern our nervous systems is a lot what drives us into these bad relationships, because it's so, you know, it can be like so like deadening and so depressing to not have that dramatic stimulation going on. And so sometimes a dramatic relationship, that's what feels like. It feels big, it feels like fireworks, it feels like love. That's what we knew, right? But it's not love, it's drama. And in your case, it's abuse. Abuse, drama, addiction. Addiction to the relationship. That's what the trauma bond is. So it's okay. And just like, you know, just like any addiction, it's not your fault. You didn't ask to have this wound happen to you. It's not your fault. Your symptoms are very, very normal for a girl who that happened to, who grew up to do this. So I want you to just like, you know, see if you can detach a little bit from the shame and acknowledge, yeah, it's going to hurt. I'm going to go through withdrawal, and then line up your support to make your exit. I promise you this relationship is not getting better. It's not going to turn into the love you crave. And the love you crave is possible for you. But the longer you stay in an abusive relationship, the more healing is going to take. Like, let's say you had a year of healing before this relationship. Now maybe you have 2 years of healing before you can do it. Like, get out. Let's get on with the healing phase so you can move on to the happy phase and the love phase of life. Life is short. Actually, life feels kind of long to me. But you don't want to spend another day suffering like this in a way that's just deteriorating your spirits and causing you to have strange mind warps, because one day you're going to meet somebody healthy and you're going to want to have a nice, good mind and be able to show up with an open heart and clear thinking and worthy of that good relationship that you crave. So that's coming for you. But first you have to get the poison out, and you are sitting in a vat of poison right now. Okay. So you told me about his background. He had this, he had that, he had this bad stuff happen. Right. But he's not in your life anymore. He's your ex. I want to tell you a secret. I don't know if you've seen many of my videos, but this is my suggestion to everybody with CPTSD who has attachment wounds, who finds themselves in bad relationships. Once you break up, this is what you do. You don't have contact with them anymore. There's no such thing as an ex/friend. There's no such thing. It's a such thing for people who have no emotions about somebody, who have a common purpose with them, but you do not have neutral energy towards him. You do not have a healthy attitude. It's a fantasy that you could just like use words and say, now we're just friends. And, you know, judging by my own time in this kind of headspace, I'm going to guess you didn't even mean it when you said just be friends. Probably a lot of things you say are just to try to see if you can get him to activate his desire to save the relationship. I don't think you want to be friends with him. I think you're in love with him. And I understand. That's what we do. But if you want to heal from that, just sick, life-destroying love that you feel, and you know what? It's not love, by the way. It's the closest thing to love that you can imagine right now. But there's a such thing as real love, and it's on the other side of this for you. And it cannot begin till you get out. Till you get out and take your time to heal. And healing, you know, people say a lot of different things about it. They say it's going to take a long time. And what always discouraged me as a person with CPTSD is people say, you know, you have to finally face your childhood trauma. It's like, okay, I'm well aware of my childhood trauma. Well, how come I'm not better yet? I have never had luck just facing it or talking about it. I use specific concrete techniques. I work with my nervous system. I then take on the terrible life problems that I created for myself while living life with a dysregulated nervous system. And I teach that stuff. You can come into my program. We have like an inner circle of members where people help each other and have Zoom meetings, and there's like 4 meetings a day that people are leading just among the peers, and then I lead calls. There's stuff you could do. And if you have other things that you think might be helpful, check that out. Like, get busy. All the energy you're putting into this relationship, if you could put that into recovery, you'd be doing it full time. I can hear you're full time engaged with this terrible situation. You say, what do I do? And this is where I thought that maybe this was a trick letter, because it's like, I just feel like, did you really think I would have some sage advice for how to get him to be where you want him to be, that he would just realize that you're great and he would stop drinking and become something? Like, I have nothing for that. I wish I did. I have a lot of people in my life who have died from this disease. And if I could have saved him, I would have. I have nothing for you, and nobody does. People who have alcoholism, they can recover. and they do it because of the help of another alcoholic who talks to them about it in a way they can relate. And it's a long process. And for you, you might be like me. You've done it enough times and you've seen what it does to your life. If you ever take my dating course, I'm gonna have you first thing, write down exactly what you want and what you need in a relationship and what's a deal breaker. And whether you see it now or not, I'm going to encourage you to put down, cannot now and never can have had an alcohol problem. Like, I think recovering alcoholics can be wonderful partners, especially if they've got some time. For you and me, no, just don't. I just would say that's been a pattern so many times, you know where it leads. And here's the thing, because twice I've been with partners who were recovered, but then they relapsed. And I totally forgot about that could happen. And at the time they relapsed, I would have to say there was a lot of drama going on. You know, there were ways that they were letting me down. I was upset. We were arguing. That's very stressful for somebody with an addiction or alcoholism. It's no one else's fault that they drink or, overdose. But you don't want to be the person who is having an argument with them the day that happens. That's not a good feeling. It's not good karma. And I would just say, given that this is a vulnerable area for you, just block it out. Your CPTSD will tell you no love is possible. There's no love, only love. The only thing I'll ever have is this guy, and I have to like work it out with him. It's a lie. There will come a day, trust me, you won't think about that guy, and when you do, you'll just go, oh, I can't, oh, what a terrible year and a half of my life. Oh, that was so unhappy. That will be the thing that you get to let go of, not your life, not your future, not your happiness, not your story, not your awareness. You said you had an eating disorder. That's a big deal. People who have an eating disorder, that's a serious struggle and deserves your top attention. It's your top attention. It's not going to go away because somebody else changes their behavior. That is trauma-driven codependent thinking. I will be happy if I can get them to change. I'm going to put a video at the end of this that talks about what I really think about that. I kind of mince no words about what I think that is, having taken that thinking all the way to the end of the road where the person dies. Okay? I'm trying to give you a cautionary warning here. Don't go there. Don't take it that far. You can get out now with a minimal of damage, and I recommend it. Okay. So, yeah, there's more stories. He says this, he says that, as if you're trying to convince me he's being unfair. Of course he is. He's awful. What a nightmare. Wow. And you say you're not a crier, you're a stifler and a flighter. I see that. That's how you coped with it before. That's how you're coping with it now. Stifling is deadly, though. That's how we crap fit and we accept abusive behavior, is just stifle the feelings about it. And then don't tell anybody. Whatever you do, don't tell anybody, because they're going to say what I'm saying. Girl, you got to get out, right? Which you don't want to hear, because right now your CPTSD believes, if you're like me, it's not fully conscious, but trust, I don't know, see if you identify with this. It feels like you will die if you leave the relationship. That's an abandonment wound doing the talking, okay? You're not going to die at all. You'd be fine. But you need love. You need love and support from women friends who understand what this is, which you can find in 12-step meetings, Al-Anon, or maybe sex and love addicts. So your question, there was this little irony here. How do I support him? I don't know if you, at this point, you've heard me say so much intense stuff in your face, but you do not support him. That is not your job. It's not appropriate. When you say that, that's when you sound to me like you've had a break with reality. You don't support him. He's throwing wontons at your head. Okay? He says he's threatening violence. He's throwing you out. It's just, you don't support him. It's not your job. You can't. You're ineffective. You're a terrible supporter. I think sometimes that's what got through to me, is when people would point out what a terrible job I was doing. If I believed that I was helping somebody keep it together, I sure had another think coming, because look at that person. They weren't together. So you're not good at this. So step back. Take all that energy. You know who your job is? You know the answer, right? It's you. Your life is a mess right now. And this is a beautiful moment when you get to go, oh gosh, yes, this has been like horrible. I need it to be better. I need it to be easier. I need people. I need to feel hope. I need people to just say kind things and give me a little validation. So here you are. Welcome, Casey. Welcome, welcome to the beautiful warm waters of kind people who believe in your recovery and want to help you do it. But this is what it looks like. You can't start recovering while you're engaged in this trauma bonded, codependent, bad dream that all your energy has to go into saving somebody who's just going down the tubes. You cut off contact. You don't contact them at all. No explanation is needed. You change your locks, move away if you have to. I'm telling you, your life can't turn out well. If this is your third one, there's going to be a fourth one. Please stop now. Do whatever it takes. Change whatever you need to change about your life. Take some time off. Get public assistance if you need to. Get to the meetings. Like, put yourself first. For the first time in your life, put your healing first. Do whatever it takes to put your healing first and pop out of this so that you can begin to sprout like a little dandelion coming through the cracks in the sidewalk. There's just been this terrible period where there's so much you didn't say about your life, but I can imagine. It's hollow. It's not going anywhere. There's probably something, maybe you have a job where you get some self-esteem or something, but you can't even feel your own thoughts because there's this huge wall of codependent, trauma-bonded crazy happening, just playing in front of your eyes all day long. So you walk away, and then your true feelings and your true perceptions can begin to come back. And it feels good. It feels really good. You just need some help to get through the hard spells, which might be a lot for the first couple of weeks, and then it just comes in waves. You'll have pain, you'll cry, you'll be like, I want to go back. And then you'll be like, no, I'm going to call my friend. I feel like going back. And your friend goes, don't go back. And you go, I know. She says, come on, let's go get some tea. Let's go sit down. Let's go have a walk. Let's go to the movie. Let's go put on warm socks. Whatever it is that you need to just be comforted through those moments, and then it passes. That's what CPTSD is like. It's like these waves that just tell you weird stories. And right now you're in the middle of a tsunami. It's not your fault. And you're not crazy. There's actually nothing wrong with you. The symptoms have gotten the better of you. So this part at the end where you say you feel so bad that he might need a hug, that he never hugged you, but he might need one and you want to be there. So, I'm just going to venture to say, whenever you have this thought about him, like, poor him, he needs a hug, just say, that's my CPTSD distorting something when the thought really is, I need a hug. I need a hug. And you don't need a hug from your abuser. You need a hug from somebody who is kind and caring and never yells at you or throws anything at you. And that would be women who are on the journey of healing with you. And perhaps a therapist if you can afford it. So I wish you well. And I wish you Godspeed to make this difficult, perilous journey out of a relationship that has a grip on your brain. But you can do it. I did it. So many people here did it. And just come on in. The water's just fine. It feels very good. And it's going to turn out so much better. And you'll only be able to experience it when you give it a try. Bad relationships are not only bad while you're in them, they leave scars that touch every part of your life. They drain you. They take your energy. And I'm talking about relationships with certain kinds of people who show up over and over again in relationships with those of us who grew up with abuse and neglect. And it's this negative feedback loop that if you grew up with these types, who I call energy vampires, we're vulnerable to finding them out in the world and making them our boyfriend or girlfriend or husband or wife or friend with benefits or some out-of-reach limerent object who we just suffer over without even having them in our lives. Energy vampires are horrible because they steal the energy that you would otherwise use to build your life, to grow as a person, to learn things, to make money, to find love, to be healthy, perhaps to have children, to make a difference in the world. And those are the things that you might long for, but the momentum it takes to do great things like that is all spilled away. It's just frittered away or consumed by another person who feeds off it. There really are people who crave what they get by getting involved with people like us who had trauma, who maybe don't have good boundaries, who sometimes are just hurting enough to also crave that draining dynamic, even if it's not entirely conscious. Do you think that's possible? It's as if we offer ourselves up to them. Now, why would we do that? Why would they do that? And if this has happened to you before, how can you spot energy vampires from 50 yards off so they never get into your life and drain you ever again? So let's talk about who they are. Not all energy vampires are trying to rob you of your life force. Some are just damaged people who can't help but try to get energy from other people. Some people do it on purpose. Like, that's a form of what I call romantic shoplifting. The romantic shoplifter variety of energy vampire includes people who are deceptive. They figure out what you're looking for and then they enthusiastically play the part so that they can get you where they want you. Admiring them, being vulnerable with them, shedding all your boundaries and abandoning yourself in favor of them, surrendering. Now, if you pair together an aggressively self-seeking person and a traumatized person, you can get this surrender to happen like in a single evening, right? The traumatized person will read this as, oh, it's love at first sight, it's destiny, only to find out the next morning that nothing that was said and done the night before was sincere or real. Now, if you've ever been left in the dust like that, think back to how you felt and how drained it left you of confidence, of your personal power, of any kind of hope at all. It doesn't exactly work like this, but it's as if the person who did this took that energy of yours and they took it into themselves. So now they feel a double dose of confidence and optimism. They're swollen now with the power that only hours before was your power. What is that power you lose in these interactions? You don't think about it. The power of your own being, your dignity, your power to choose, your potential, your path. And when you let an energy vampire into your life, that power becomes dimmed and dented and drained. So that's a romantic shoplifter kind of energy vampire. Another kind is a long-term deceiver. And this could be the spouse who secretly cheats on you and takes the energy of all that you would one day otherwise have built together, who takes that and also the daily, warmth, the listening, the attention that you were meant to enjoy over the dinner table together. They take that, it was yours, it was rightfully yours because that's what a marriage is. You sort of give each other that sort of daily energy. You share that together and they give it to somebody else. So it could be an affair, could be a pattern of flirting and making you jealous. Maybe you don't know about it, but that energy is gone. And the energy they're taking from you is your good faith, your steady partner energy. They take that energy and then also go take someone else's energy for the exciting part. And that someone else might be the victim of like my first example, who's been persuaded that this huge and sudden great love has appeared in their lives overnight, not realizing that tomorrow they're going to be drained too. An energy vampire could be a partner who's abusive, physically or emotionally, who gets energy from everything that happens, not only during the abuse, maybe not even during the abuse, but afterward. Now, it's true that some people enjoy hurting other people. That's true. But there are also those who are addicted to that recovery period that follows cruel behavior. The cruelty for them could be driven by, a frustrated buildup of anger or emptiness. Then they lash out, and the recovery period will soon begin, the return to intimacy. And there's this moment there between, the cruelty and the reconciliation that has this light and floaty weightlessness. And people get addicted to that feeling. It's like a zero gravity flight where the plane goes way up and then drops straight down for a minute. And right at the top there's this release, this lightness, especially if they're confident that you're not going to leave them despite what they did. Up, down. And energy vampires, they love to argue. Having an argument brings on something inside them that's like a cool rain after a hot storm. They hurt you and scatter all your expectations of them for a little spell. But for them, that's like hitting a reset button. Takes the pressure off. I get letters from people about all of these patterns. But the one I see the most is from people, mostly women, but also men, who have lost their energy to the first kind of vampire I described, the one who stirs up your romantic energy so they can jam a straw in it and drink it from you and then leave. And it makes me think of a lemon. And, actually, I just learned this. I don't know if you know this, but before you cut a lemon in half to juice it, you can actually smash the lemon, crush it a little bit, like roll it on the counter and squish it, and it ruptures all the little cells inside. And so then when you cut the lemon, you barely have to squeeze. It just kind of pours right out. It's like the lemon just gives its juice to you. And that rolled lemon is like someone raised with trauma. They meet someone who wants to feed off their energy, and it's just sitting there for them. They're just like a crushed lemon. Is it always so evil when people do this to another person? No, not. It's not always intentional. If it is, yeah, that's evil. It's often, though, someone who is traumatized themselves, and they're stealing energy because they don't know any other way to stop the pain that they're feeling inside. They want love and connection, right? Everybody does. But they're not capable of showing up for that or creating it. And it comes out as good intentions, and they just can't follow up on it. And it can be triggered by people pleasing, saying, oh, I love you, this is going to be great. They can see that you want to be admired and loved for a little while, and they can't help but produce that for you. They make it happen, but they just can't sustain it. They can't stick around. Or maybe they carry hurt and shame inside, and wooing you is a high that gives them a break from those dark feelings. Now, I'm not excusing it at all. I'm just saying sometimes people who steal energy are like a hungry person stealing bread. Sometimes they're intensity junkies, the intensity of instant romance, even though logically they know it'll turn into loneliness tomorrow. For right now, it feels an emptiness inside, and it's an emptiness that was unbearable. They wanted a vacation from it at any cost. They may have too many problems to really show up in a relationship or to tolerate the responsibility of another person. So the romantic hit job on you is all they can get, and they take what they can get. They take it. A lot of people who feed off the energy of other people dress up their actions with a lot of BS about, just being cool or open-minded and not possessive and no expectations, or they don't like definitions and labels around relationships. You can dress it up in 100 ways, but their logic for taking and not giving back will always make it feel to the person whose energy they're taking, that, whoa, they're the ones being selfish and uncool. And that's why people with childhood PTSD can so easily end up getting manipulated and losing their energy in relationships because they're conditioned to second guess themselves. When something doesn't feel right to you, what are the odds that you're just going to think, well, it's probably just me. And then you'll talk yourself out of setting a boundary. You'll stay connected to this person who's taking your energy, and you'll attack yourself instead for feeling bad. Now, if that's your pattern, energy vampires will gravitate to you. You're just their type. Occasionally, they might be people who enjoy hurting others. Such people exist, but in my observation, it's mostly just one kind of hurt person connecting in a broken way with another hurt person. Nobody really wins, but one thing's for sure, you need your energy back. You need that energy. That's yours. So why do you end up with energy vampires? Why, when what you want is a sincere and lasting and reciprocal relationship, do you keep finding yourself getting love bombed and then discarded? I have no doubt that people who get drained like this had a pattern stamped into their little spirits when they were small by parents who couldn't give them what they needed. And what's done is done. It might be good if you know how you got this way, but it usually doesn't change the problem at hand, which is that you haven't yet changed your pattern. So let's ask a different question and see if that helps. What is it about this dynamic, at least at the beginning, that keeps drawing you to energy vampires? Is there something irresistibly attractive about someone who is out to take your energy? Is there some sort of freedom from responsibility in that? Do you have a blind spot that makes it hard for you to see the signs in advance that this person is just stirring up your energy like the crushed lemon? Is it possible that, just like the vampire, you love the high of the insta-romance, but you struggle with the parts of courtship and dating that take time and patience and effort and discernment and compromise and boundaries? So you're quick to just, take the good feeling wherever you can get it and run with it, knowing on some level that it's going to drain you. I can't answer these questions for you, but they're good questions to ask. And every time you can identify the role that you play in creating draining dynamics, you take back your power a little bit. Finding the role you play is half the battle, and healing can begin when you find it.